Sorry, just one minute. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I just have an appointment.
I'm sorry, sir. Sir.
Look, I was here yesterday.
But do you have a reservation for today?
In point of fact, I'm meeting a friend.
And what is this friend's name?
What?
Their name, sir.
Oh, it's, I don't know.
I see. I'm so sorry, madame. How may I help?
Oi!
Do something!
I think you owe my girlfriend an apology, don't you?
I'm sorry, sir. I just need to see if there's anyone there I recognise.
Unbelievable.
You're just going to stand there.
Sam! I've already told you I have an appointment!
And sorry, we didn't send you the questions beforehand because I want to surprise you a little bit. And I want to be surprised also because the first surprise is the surrounding behind you. What do we see? Props of different works?
So this is my home studio, which I share with my wife, Natalie, who's also a producer on the film. I'm going to move the camera very slightly so you can get a little bit sense of where we are and where we're working. So behind me are some... Ooh. Hang on.
Ooh. Yeah.
So behind me are some of the props from the film. These are some of the objects that we created by hand for the scene in the anthropology corridor, which is this Department of Experimental Anthropology where ethnographic studies are supposedly actually enacted. And then right behind me are some... these are digital Trompe-l'oeil wallpapers that we drew as part of a project where we presented the film in this abandoned cinema from some sort of future dystopia. And
it's like the wallpaper you used in the Metro Gallery in New York, I think.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. So we just installed a little bit in our home to give our home a spooky Halloween feeling.
So how can you live you and your wife in such a surrounding with your love and your passion for Gothic props in the time of confinement? I mean, you cannot get out at all, no. So you're really surrounded inside.
Exactly. My wife only allows me to have this in the studio, which is the ground floor. But I would love to live like this in the entire house.
Mm-hmm. Your first real trip into cinema,
That's right.
in the sense that you work in a very perfectionist way with the technical side of cinema, with the narration of cinema, with your decors and props. And what is this fascination for cinema?
Well, all my work right from the very beginning was interrogating and playing with conventions of narrative. So I did a project about Adi Dassler called The Mark of the Third Stripe that played with the Gothic novella. I did a work called The School for Objects Criticized, which was playing with the radio play or / installation and the comedies of Molière, and then a very large musical theatre piece called The Humans. And in each of these pieces, I was getting closer and closer to what might one conceive of as classical storytelling and becoming more and more seduced with the possibilities of guiding the audience in the unfolding of a narrative and having more and more control in terms of the performance of the actors and the visual storytelling. So the appointment was an opportunity to take this interest in the Gothic and the fantastical and the twisted story and to explore that in the convention of real narrative cinema.
I wrote a quote of you where you said that you don't like to be seen as a visual artist who goes into theater, who goes into the movies, as if you know, that there was a fashion in the 80s when painters in Germany went into jazz music playing or filmmaking or doing sculpture, and they called it a painter's sculpture. So what don't you like it? Why don't you like that?
Well, it's, to be flippant, it's as if Sylvester Stallone becomes a painter. If you're not being serious about it, if you don't love the medium in and of itself, then it's a sort of dilettantism, and in a way, it's kind of colonial. You're saying that I come up from a privileged position where fine art is somehow a more enlightened field, and I step into your field and I deconstruct it. And often, but not always, the cliche is that a visual artist will come into a medium and just take it apart, disassemble the car, as it were, and the car no longer functions. And whilst that's an interesting gesture, I think there's so much more that you can do in these mediums. And I think one of the things about cinema that is so powerful, and there's almost something that I would think of as a duty and obligation, is the relationship to audience. In visual art, there is a certain amount of bamboozling. There's a sort of Eve Klein-like playing with the expectation in the audience. But in cinema, you have to engage people from the very first frame of the film. And if you lose them, that's agonizing. You're therefore there to challenge them, but also to give them pleasure and to keep them engaged. And that is something that you can't deny in film.
This article? Do you remember that creepy guy from anthropology? The one who made the pass at me. But then he turned out he was a complete loon. Thought he was possessed or something. Henry, are you listening? Henry! The professor, who was institutionalized 8 weeks ago, was released late last night after an abrupt recovery his physicians could only describe as miraculous.
I have an appointment, 12 o'clock, at La Folie. Only for the life of me, I can't make out the bugger's name.
I thought you stopped doing that. Are you upset with me?
Is that a P? Maybe a Y.
Don't you think that as a visual artist, les arts plastiques, that you have a different way of approaching narration in cinema and playing with genre cinema also?
That's possibly true. It's very difficult to have that kind of critical distance, to be able to look at your film and to look at other films and say, there is something specifically different here. And it'd be difficult also to ascribe that exclusively to coming from a fine arts background. Many people, including visual artists, often come from a different background. So there'll be visual artists who come from dance. In the same way, filmmakers often come from acting, comedy, writing. Sometimes they are cinematographers. A lot of the time they come from the theater. So every filmmaker always comes from their own professional background and naturally comes from their own personal, family, socioeconomic and national background. That's always going to inform every work. So you would always hope that within the conventions of story, there's always going to be different auteur.
We're meant to make living an inanimate
creature to have food on my plate.
There's not we desire to exist is to work, to from matter to weave humans from dirt.
Oh, I desire your graces, so I need to be loved in all the right places to be lit, stroked, and rubbed
by the brown young motions of our atoms within. We're moved by pure action, we know not how to sin.
I remember that when we showed the humans, the challenge for the audience was quite high. It was 3 hours.
Yes, I certainly learned my lesson. That was my Wagnerian phase. I think with a short film, and our short film is not the shortest of short films, we were really constrained, and it forces you to be much more economical. The challenge also with the appointment was to try and tell a complete story, as if it was a short story. We're very inspired by Gothic literature and stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I was thinking a lot about the short stories of E.T.A. Hoffmann and Oscar Wilde, and perhaps Roald Dahl. The main character, Henry Saltz, is in some ways a stand-in for a misanthropic writer in the vein of Roald Dahl, or perhaps today someone like Martin Amis.
I come back to the question about how you place your narration, because you have a conventional narration, but you're in a completely visual and psychological universe, which is very much your own and different from what we see normally in cinema. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I know you're needling me on this question, and I would like to somehow unfold the flower and find the truth at the heart of it. Like I've said, it's very difficult to have this perspective on what you're doing, which is not to say that making any work of art isn't an act of self-reflection. It's difficult, I would say, speaking very honestly, that it's very difficult to see the originality in your work when you are so enamored and inspired, not just by incidents in the real world, but by other filmmakers, by other visual artists, by the performances of actors. And I can see the roots myself of every visual idea that's in there. Now, the totality may end up being original, but it's very difficult for me to have that distance. It's also very difficult for anybody who makes a very big work, and this is not even exclusive just of cinema, but I remember when I made the Humans or the School for Objects Criticized, you are making something you're planning it for 1 or 2 years, you're working with the actors for anywhere between a week to 6 months, and then you're shooting, and then you are editing, and by the end, you have with the Humans, when I would watch performances, I knew every single word of a 2-hour, 35-minute, 45-minute play. I had no distance whatsoever. It takes months, if not years, to finally be able to look with some distance and to see exactly what this is and how it's different. So I'm sorry if I'm dancing around and not answering your question quite specifically, but I hope you understand why it's very difficult for me to know how to respond to that question.
then you are happy with the result?
And I think
the humans and also the appointment, the film.
I'm never happy. No, it's always every shot is always a missed opportunity. Just the other day, I was watching it, thinking, "Oh no, now we should have gone in closer to demonstrate that his mustache is missing." I'm always looking for what could be better. I'm happy that it exists because it is such a struggle to get anything to work. When you're shooting a film, every day that the film doesn't fall apart and ends before you finish shooting is a triumph. So that it exists is happy, but if I didn't have that dissatisfaction, I wouldn't always try to be doing things better the next time. It's always a continual learning experience. I think a general sense of dissatisfaction is what I carry through in my professional life.
One last question. Something which is very typical also for your works is a sort of Terry Gilliam-like humor, which helps us, the viewers, also through some of your love for the Gothic. Because it can you explain the role of the humor?
I can never take things that seriously, even in the absolute darkest moments of history or of human relations or in the darkest stories. There's always something amusing and ridiculous about the situation that we find ourselves in.
Congratulations for that. No, to achieve that is a great thing. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you so much.